YouTube. Is how Farfa starts his shit. Konami has updated a brand new tournament policy with a bunch of new rules. Some are really good, some are really scary, and a lot of them are very complicated and don't make a lot of sense to a lot of people. So I figured I would use my, my judge brain Andy in order to explain to you guys what all of these changes to the tournament policy means. So let's get into this. Let's have a look at this tournament policy update. So, Official Kitty US tournament policy, trading card game tournament policy, sorry, version 2.2. So they've updated it, and they're saying like a lot of this is giving more examples to things that are already in the policy documents, which I think is a good thing. Tournament policy in general, and this is going to sound like very strange, but tournament policy in general is always written with the intent of being somewhat vague, and the reason why they do it with the intent of it being somewhat vague is specifically because they want to be able to apply the tournament policy however they see fit without it being turned on them and being like, well, the tournament policy says otherwise kind of thing, you know what I mean? So the first change is Section 1, preparing to play. Subsection C, head judge. What they changed, they clarified that a head judge cannot make decisions that go against tournament policy, which should kind of go without saying, I think. Clarify that the head judge can disqualify people, but they cannot suspend them. This, I think, is a good one because I think a lot of people seem to have this belief that when the head judge disqualifies you, they are banning you. And they clarify that the assistant head judge cannot overrule the head judge if both the assistant head judge and the head judge are handling appeals, which happens very rarely. Usually you will only get either the head judge or an assistant head judge handling an appeal, but I guess it makes sense that the head judge still has, a little bit more power than the assistant head judge, which is fine. Assistant head judge and public event lead. This is a new section. Added this section to make information about the assistant head judge and public event lead roles easier to find and understand. I assume all they're going to be explaining here is what an assistant head judge does and what a public event lead, and it's that they kind of function as a head judge. Tier 3 events such as YCS, WCQs, the assistant head judges, and the public event lead have most of the same authority as a head judge in reference to their specific tasks. There you go. Subsection E, floor judge. What changed? Expanded and clarified the information about questions judges should and should not answer, including new examples. I want to read this. We separated the should answer and should not answer into separate sections to make it easier to process and retain the information. This is a very good update because the last time they updated this section in the tournament policy, they made a bit of an oopsie, kind of. So the question about what a judge should or should not answer is specifically pertaining to whether or not something a judge says can be viewed as coaching or not. So this is section 1, subsection E, so let's have a look. All right, should be answered. Duelist A has a face-up Beatrice, Lady the Eternal, on the field, has its effects currently negated by Imperm. Duelist B has 3 or more spell cards in their graveyard. There you go, Widow Anchor. During Duelist B's main phase, Duelist B activates Sky Shaker Mecha Widow Anchor, targeting the Beatrice Lady the Eternal, which is an illegal activation. Duelist A informs Duelist B that he will not be able to take control of his Beatrice Lady the Eternal, as has already been negated and cannot be negated again. Duelist B calls for a judge. The judge should inform the duelist that because Lady of the Eternal was already negated by another card, it can be targeted by Sky Striker Mecha Widow Anchor, and it is an illegal activation. The judge should then fix the game state as necessary. This actually goes even deeper than just this example. In that situation, if my opponent has a negated monster and I have Widow Anchor, I, as the player with Widow Anchor, am allowed to call the judge and say, hey judge, am I legally allowed to activate this card targeting their Beatrice? And the judge is legally allowed to answer me and say, no, that is not a legal activation. In general, when it comes to asking a question about activation legality, that is never coaching. Asking how an effect will resolve could result in coaching, if that makes more sense. You know what I mean? Should be answered. Duelist A has a face of Beatrice Lady the Eternal on the field that has effects currently negated by Imperm. Duelist B has 3 or more spell cards in their graveyard. During Duelist B's main phase, Duelist B calls for a judge. This is exactly what I was saying. Duelist B shows their hand to the judge and asks if they will be able to take control of Beatrice Lady the Eternal with this card in their hand, showing the Widow Anchor to the judge but not to the opponent. Without revealing the Sky Striker Mecha Widow Anchor to Duelist A, the judge should inform Duelist B that the activation of that card would be illegal. Exactly what I said. So yeah, this is protecting the game state and is not coaching. Should be answered. Duelist A normal summons Candina and activates this effect with 4 other cards in his hand. Duelist B has Imperm and Ash Blossom in his hand and no cards on his side of the field. Duelist B calls the judge and asks, which one of these cards can I use? Showing the judge his hand. The judge should inform Duelist B, without revealing the contents of his hand, that either of the two cards are legal to activate at this time. The judge should not provide additional information until after the duelist makes a decision to activate a card and it is time to resolve the chain. Exactly. So basically what this is saying, if the player is asking, can I activate Ash or Imperm, the judge should say, yes, you can activate them. However, if the player is asking, how does my Imperm resolve if I target his Candina, the judge should not answer that question. This next one is the interesting one. I'm curious if they change this. Duelist A has Goes in Match and Thunder Dragon Titan on the field and more than 2 cards in their graveyard. Duelist B has Sky Striker Ace Kagari on the field, Sky Striker Maneuver Afterburners in his hand, and 3 or more spell cards in his graveyard. In Duelist B's main phase, he calls for a judge. Duelist B shows his hand to the judge and asks, if I use this on his monster, but it does not get destroyed, can I still destroy 1 spell or trap card on the field? Without revealing the card in question or giving a yes or no answer, the judge should quickly explain problem-solving card text conjunctions to the duelist and how those conjunctions are used to determine how the effects will resolve. I believe they changed this. So if the player asks the judge, if I use Afterburner on his Titan and he protects with Titan, can I still pop a back row? The judge's answer should not be no. The judge's answer should be, when a card has text that reads, do A, then do B, do A is required to be successful in order to then do B. That's what the judge should be answering. Because at that point, you are not giving a player information that they should not already know. Understanding problem-solving card text is a thing that is assumed that all players know and understand. It's basically everyone knows the alphabet, and you're just at the table like singing them the alphabet song so that they remember it, if that makes sense. Judges should not answer questions that would involve a discussion of cards not in the duelist's hand or field. Fair. I like this a lot. Provide duelists with specific strategy advice. This is coaching. Instruct the duelist how best to play their cards. Again, coaching. And revealing private knowledge. So basically, if a player tells me, I have this card in my hand, I should not, as the judge, go, damn, that's crazy. Afterburners? Wild. You know what I mean? I need to see this. Subsection J, media. They've officially separated official media and fan content creation. That's me. So official media would be like a news outlet or something like that, right? Or if like fucking Kotaku or something like that pulls up. As opposed to fan created content. Select Tier 3 events may include a fan content area where even event attendees can create photo and video content, interviews, deck profiles, etc. for social media use. Usage rules apply for the fan content creation area. Must sign a form and agree to abide by the fan content area requirements. May be asked to sign additional code of conduct. Must sign for a session to use the area. So you have to like book it, which is really weird and strange. I don't like that you have to book the fan content creation area. I also dislike that this... like the official media is able to like record in the venue and stuff like that. But if you're a fan content creator, like a YouTuber or whatever, you're not recognized as official enough to be allowed to record in the venue. And then you have to adhere by the code of conduct, which we can read later down the line. So that's the update to the media section. Okay, duelist responsibilities. This is the section that is very important if you are attending a Yu-Gi-Oh tournament. This is the kind of shit that you need to know when going to a tournament because this impacts like players and stuff like that and how tournament attendance functions. Expanded the section on retracting legal moves. We separated the cannot retract and can retract due to illegal activation, as there is currently some confusion about whether or not a duelist can or cannot retract an illegal activation. We explained the process for resolving an illegal action. This is an important one because a lot of people seem to not understand what does or doesn't constitute an action that can be rewound. Like, say, for example, I activate Mystical Space Typhoon, and I target a spell or trap that can't be targeted on my opponent's field. That's an illegal activation because I targeted an illegal target. And a lot of players will say something along the lines of, oh, well, you have to pick a legal target because you activated Mystical Space Typhoon. Prior to this change, if they changed it at all, was if you activate Mystical Space Typhoon and target an illegal card, that's an illegal activation. You take back the illegal play, meaning you go back to before you activated Mystical Space Typhoon. Legal actions cannot be retracted. So legal action cannot be retracted. A duelist sets a card in the spell trap card zone and removes his hand from the card. The duelist may not choose to take back the move and re-add the set card to his hand. obviously. A duelist has 2 face-up attack position monsters on the field. During your battle phase, she verbally declares an attack with monster A while gesturing that monster B attacks. Whatever you say takes precedent over what you do. So if monster A can legally attack, the duelist cannot make a different choice. So that's the thing that to keep in mind. You have to be careful not to misspeak in real life when you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, literally, if you activate Reinforcement of the Army, and you say, add Armageddon Knight, and then you add Dark Grepher to your hand, if you have Armageddon Knight in your deck, you are adding Armageddon Knight. A legal action cannot be retracted. So this is just all the things that cannot be retracted. A duelist uses a card or effect to search for a card in his deck. He selects a card and reveals the card to the opponent. He cannot change his mind and search for a different card instead, even if he never took his hand off the card. I'm super guilty of this. One thing that I used to do all the time, and I stopped doing it because it goes against this rule, is I would... Like, say I'm searching through my deck for a card, right? Like, say I have my deck here somewhere, I think. Yeah. So say I'm playing Unchained, right? And I'm looking through my deck, and I'm resolving the search. And I'm thinking I might search Aruha. I would oftentimes take the Aruha, put it on the table, and go still thinking on if this is what I want to add. And then keep going through my deck, and then be like, okay, I'll add the Aruha. Or sometimes I would change it. You're not allowed to do that. Make sure that if you are going through your deck to add something, while your deck is in your hands is when you're thinking, and the moment you pull a card out of it, you have made your decision. Keep that in mind. Retracting moves due to an illegal activation. If you take an action in the game that turns out to be illegal, call for a judge. The judge can assess the situation, allow any necessary retractions or corrections, and issue the appropriate penalty. Illegal actions must be retracted. If you catch an illegal action, you must take it back. You can't just go like, okay, well, we'll continue. A duelist declares they will perform a link summon of Nightmare Phoenix. They send 2 copies of Mystical Shine Ball. They control the graveyard and summon Nightmare Phoenix. Afterwards, both duelists realize Nightmare Phoenix requires 2 monsters with different names. A judge should be called, the move will be retracted, and the judge will issue a procedural error penalty. Notice how it doesn't say that the player will take back the Phoenix and be forced to link summon something else. Even if they have a legal link summon target for the 2 Shine Balls, you're not forced to make a legal link 2 with those 2 Shine Balls. An illegal action must be retracted. A duelist activates Monster Reborn from his hand and targets Destiny Hero Plasma in his graveyard. Since Plasma must be special summoned through its effect, the activation of Monster Reborn is illegal, and Monster Reborn is returned to his hand. And the judge will issue a procedural error penalty. This is true even if he has another monster graveyard that can be summoned with the effect of Monster Reborn. Exactly the same example that I gave you with MST. You're not forced to change the target in order to make the activation legal. If the activation was illegal, you take it back. Duelist A has Skull Servant and Access Code Talker in his graveyard. Activates Monster Reborn from his hand, targets Access Code Talker. Duelist B has no response, and Duelist A summons that monster. Soon after resolving the effect of Duelist B, Duelist B realizes that he negated the link summon of Access Code Talker with Solemn Warning. Since the card was an illegal target, the entire activation of Monster Reborn was illegal. Access Code Talker should be returned to the graveyard, and the Monster Reborn should be returned to Duelist A's hand. Duelist A is not forced to target the Skull Servant in his graveyard. So does that clarify things? I feel like this is a thing that has been a thing for a long time, and I think is something that's important to clarify. But I think it's very important to understand that, because I know a lot of people, especially beginner players, will get scummed out of stuff like that a lot. Dude, the amount of times in like Zoo format where a player would summon a monster that is like can't be targeted, and then one player would go Trident target the monster, and they're like, oh, you can't target it, you have to pop your own Trident now, and that's not how that works. So just keep that in mind. Live streamed event, new section. Covers policy related to appearing on camera at a live streamed event. So let's have a look. Some events will feature live stream matches. Duelists who participate in a match shown on live stream must agree to the following. Use only an officially licensed Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG game mat or non-branded game mat, and officially licensed Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG card sleeves or not branded card sleeves. So you can't pull up with Pokemon shit, for example. If sleeves and or game mat are provided to use for stream, you must use the items provided. Any tournament material, including dice, counters, tokens, needed should be reviewed for acceptability prior to the start of the match. Clothing, accessories, or other items featuring logos or intellectual property from brands other than Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG cannot be shown on livestream. Clothing with branding from official tournament stores is acceptable, provided that it does not fall under the items prohibited in unacceptable behavior. Cooperate with tournament officials and livestream technicians to set up and stream the match. Well, you know, they did that a long time ago. Actually, a long time ago, they had this thing that if a player played, had a team jersey, they would ask them to do one of two things. Change out of the team jersey, or they would say if you don't have something else to change into, turn it inside out. They literally would have you turn it inside out. They did that ages ago, like a long time ago. They haven't done that in a while, but they used to do that. They used to ask players to turn their like team jerseys inside out because they didn't want you promoting it. Tournament information. This section covers information about tournament logistics such as round times. This is big. I don't even need to pull it up. Round times for Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 in-person events are now 45 minutes. This means Tier 1, locals. Tier 2, regionals. Tier 3, YCSs. I think this is a very good change. I think they could even go up as high as 50 minutes. But the reason why they're keeping it low is because events tend to run kind of late. But I like the idea of 45, still better than 40. Any help is you know, acceptable. Tournament registration. So this is basically just to say that you can now register online. And deck registration is basically saying that if you submit a deck list online for a tournament, you cannot change it under any circumstance except if a new ban list releases between the time you submitted your deck list and the tournament taking place. So if there's a ban list that goes into effect in between the time where you submitted your list and the tournament actually taking place, you can then change your deck list. It specifies you cannot drop from an event and re-register and attempt to alter your deck list. This type of shit will most likely get you suspended. So keep that in mind. Most tournaments nowadays do not use paper signups anymore. They will use online signups. So, you know, keep that in mind. Sleeves. This one, we don't even need to go through the tournament policy itself. This is just clarifications. So they clarified that you cannot use sleeves that are too big for your cards because sometimes people would pull up with like MTG size sleeves, and MTG size sleeves will result in your cards being marked because not all your cards will look the same.
What do you
face
do?
down.
You play
clarified duelists cannot use top loaders or hard cases instead of sleeves. No shit. I've never seen this in my life. We set a requirement for tinted clear sleeves. So if your cards are fully clear and transparent, you probably cannot use them. But if they're tinted, it might be based on the requirements that are going to be in the tournament policy. If you intend to bring clear sleeves, check the tournament policy for that. Clarify that either sleeve used in double sleeving can be clear on both sides. It does not matter if it is the inner or the outer sleeve as long as one of them is clear. And double sleeving means up to 2 sleeves per card, not more. Which, I mean, goes... Yu-Gi-Oh players are not reading, by the way, but double sleeving means double sleeving, not triple or quadruple sleeving. You know what I mean? Section H, tournament materials. This is an interesting one, specifically for Kashtira. Okay, so Kashtira players, open your eyes and listen. Look at the screen. Look at the screen right now. Tournament materials. We have added new tournament materials zone markers to indicate blocked zones. So I'm going to go read through this once we read this small section here to know what exactly they've outlined as legal and illegal zone markers to indicate block zones. Clarify that the head judge does not have the right to go against tournament policy by allowing or disallowing tournament materials that are prohibited or allowed in policy. So for example, if I have blocked zones, like zone markers that are in line with tournament policy, the head judge cannot overrule that and say, no, I am not allowing this. They're not allowed to do that. They have to conform with tournament policy. Same thing goes with the other way around. If your head judge is super lenient and just goes, oh yeah, those blocked zone markers are fine, even though they're not in line with tournament policy, they can't choose to let you do it. And we've added additional information for live stream matches. I assume the additional information is specifically that on a live stream match, you need to use official tournament supplied zone markers. So let's have a look. Subsection H. Responsible to ensure that all tournament materials you bring to the event meet tournament legal standards. That means no, chat, I'm looking at you, y'all coomers. No booba playmat. No feet pick deck boxes. No, none of that shit, bro. Okay? Do not pull up with sleeves that show an anime girl's entire ass, bro. Okay? Yeah, 1984. Cry about it, chat. Cry about it. Okay? The only thing you are allowed to bring is a dude with big abs, dude. Okay? Pull up with a deck box with a dude with massive abs. That's legal. To an extent. Zone markers used to indicate block zones must meet the following requirement. The marker must have an X or text stating the zone is blocked. Generic items such as dice, coins, counters, etc. cannot be used. Generic tokens or token used for other purposes cannot be used. So basically, you need the X on it. You need the X on it to show that the zone is blocked, or it has to say blocked or something that otherwise very clearly distinguishes that the zone is blocked. Where's the live stream changes? I don't see them. If you're participating in a live stream event, you may be required to abide by additional rules regarding the tournament materials. Yeah. This basically just means you have to use the ones that they supply you. All right, let's keep going. Field layout, what changed? Updated text, replacing cards on the field with the text used in the speed duel addendum. Fair, they're just doing a little bit of cleanup. Note-taking, they've separated what is and isn't allowed for note-taking. And they've addressed points of confusion from judges and duelists. I hope that if they made one clarification to this that would be useful, it would be noting whether or not counting summons verbally or with a die or something like that is or isn't allowed. I think if they make that very clear, that would be a good idea. Here are the things that you are allowed to take note of, okay? You are allowed to take note of the following. You must keep a written record of both duelist life points. You're allowed to use a calculator to calculate life points, but you shouldn't use a calculator to track life points, if that makes sense. So calculator for doing the math, but everything should be written on a piece of paper because it's very difficult to accidentally erase a piece of paper. Tracking of mandatory effect reminders. This means I activate Mech Knight Purple Nightfall, and it's going to come back in the next standby phase. I am allowed to write down like a reminder to myself to bring back Purple Nightfall in the next standby phase because it has already been activated, therefore must resolve, as opposed to if I send Skarm to the graveyard, Skarm activates in the end phase. So it hasn't been activated yet, so I'm not allowed to write down, remember to activate Skarm in end phase. Okay. Tracking of turns and turn counters. Tracking of effects or actions necessary to maintain a legal game state. This was like writing down which tier limit names you've used already. Written records are the only acceptable form of note-taking. You may not use generic items such as dice, counters, or tokens as a form of note-taking, as this can be confused with other game elements. Notes must be taken quickly. Notes are considered public knowledge, so if your opponent asks to see your notes, you have to provide it to them. And the notes function on Neuron may not be used during a match. You may not use outside notes during a match, which includes in between games of a match. You may consult a copy of your deck list between matches, not in between games of a match, to ensure you have restored your main deck, side deck, and extra deck to proper condition. This is important. You're not allowed to look at your side deck mid-game. This is a thing that a lot of people will do. They're like, I don't remember if I sided this card out, and then they pick up their side deck to look at it. That is super not allowed. So note-taking that is allowed. Keeping record of life points, written notes, tracking mandatory effects. The duelist activates a card with a mandatory effect which lasts for 3 turns. Both duelists should track on paper how many turns have passed. And returning the deck to correct state. A duelist keeps a copy of their deck list and checks it between matches. So this is between rounds. You're not allowed to do this mid-game or anything like that. Note-taking that is not allowed. Consulting outside notes is not allowed. A duelist may not consult a list of side deck choices against specific decks in between games and in a match. So basically this is saying if you have like a cheat sheet of like side this, side out this, side in this against certain decks or whatever, you are allowed to look at it in between rounds. You are not allowed to look at it between duels of a match. Using generic items instead of writing notes is not allowed. Duelist A activates Offering the Doomed. Duelist A cannot place a coin or other item on the deck to remind them to not draw on their next turn. Despite the fact that this is super visual, you're not allowed to do this. A duelist activates Eradicator Epidemic Virus and declares spell cards. They look at their opponent's hand for spell cards to destroy. The duelist may not write down any notes on the names of the other cards in the opponent's hand, as this information does not help maintain an accurate and legal game state. Oh, I believe that they also updated something important for the tournament policy, which I think we get to here. Public knowledge. Public and private knowledge is something that a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh players don't comprehend. And this policy document has clarified a lot of things. But before we get into it, I want to clarify one very, very, very important thing. I activate Reinforcement of the Army and add Dark Grepher to my hand. Immediately when I add it, you're allowed to ask me, wait, sorry, what did you add? And I'll say, Dark Grepher. After that point, after we've moved on with the game, you cannot ask me, yo, what did you add off Rhoda? Yo, what do I know in your hand? And stuff like that. The contents of my hand, even if you fully know them, are not public knowledge. Alright, duelists may not refuse to answer questions about information that is public knowledge. Lying about or refusing to answer questions about information that's public knowledge may result in a disqualification penalty. Here are the only things that are public knowledge. The number of cards in a duelist's hand. Number of cards in a duelist deck. Number and names of cards in duelist graveyard and face-up banished cards. Both duelists' current life points. Any notes taken by either duelist during a duel. Which cards were searched, set, summoned, destroyed, banished, activated, or targeted by an effect during the current turn. So like I said, on that turn, you are allowed to, like, which cards were interacted with are public knowledge. Beyond that, they're not anymore. Information printed on any card that was searched, set, summoned, destroyed, banished, activated, or targeted by an effect during the current turn. So for example, if I set if I set a card or whatever, that you know I set via card effect, I can ask like, what's the attribute of that card or whatever, for example, and you have to tell me during the current turn only. Whereas private knowledge, which is also something that they updated, all right? The following information is considered private knowledge unless a card effect states otherwise. Keep in mind, lying about private information or revealing private information are not allowed. Simple. They are not allowed. All the cards still in deck are private knowledge. All cards that are face down, even cards that have previously been face up, are private knowledge. This includes that cards that are in your hand because they are, you know, their back is turned to the opponent, so they are face down to them. You know what I mean? Private knowledge that cannot be revealed. A duelist may not reveal that he has Honest in hand unless he is legally activating the card. Here's a thing that's very important, and that happens fairly often. It'll happen pretty often that a player will, like sometimes players will, like, do their combo, whatever, and go, yo, if you have nib, just show it and I'll scoop. You saying that is breaking the rules. Your opponent showing you they have nib is also breaking the rules. You have to play the fucking game. A duelist may not reveal his set Mirror Force unless he is legally activating the card. This is big. Duelist A cannot ask Duelist B, do I know any of your cards? This question gets asked all the fucking time. All the damn time. All the pro players ask this all the time. And in their head, in their brain, in their mind, dude, to them, this is like such a normal question. Because they ask each other this all the time when playtesting. And a lot of players just assume that this is like okay to answer. It's not. It simply isn't. On the previous turn, Duelist A activated UCT. It's a set face down. Duelist B's Havness, Fenrir, and Dweller. During the current turn, Duelist A cannot ask Duelist B to verify the identities of monsters set by UCT. So yeah, cards cease being public knowledge when the turn is passed. Card hand and deck verification. We split the examples for not appropriate for a judge to verify and appropriate for a judge to verify into separate tables. Hopefully some common misconceptions are now cleared up. Well, I mean, so this isn't too hard. A judge is just simply not going to verify the contents of your opponent's hand or deck or something like that unless they have a very reasonable, under reasonable suspicion that they're lying or cheating or something like that. Handling card loops. Brother, may I have some loops? May I have some loops? We added a restriction for controlled loops with net gain die roll effects. They made an entire policy section for Telephone. Oh yeah. Using a whole number, positive value, inform your opponent how many times you intend to repeat the loop. If a die roll is involved, the net gain of which does not affect the loop continuing, then the number of times you can repeat the loop is 1. Roll the die only once. There is no need to keep rolling the die as the loop will not be repeated. If the start point and end point of a turn will be the same, but the order of the cards played may change, perform the loop once. So basically, this is saying roll the die for Telephone once and then just keep doing it. I don't get this. Because, like, what if they interrupt my Telephone loop? How many life points am I on if they choose to interrupt it after 100 times? I think this example needs further clarification. Conceding gamer match. What changed? We clarified that some events will not allow conceding or may have additional requirements in order to concede. I assume that this is for, like, YCS finals and stuff like that. They don't allow concession in YCS finals, or we'll see in the policy documents if that's what they say. And we clarified that you cannot ask your opponent to concede to you even if you do not offer a bribe. This was added because this example happened on KONAMI Livestream recently. 5 hours in. Dude, you're insane. Thank you, Quantal. I appreciate it. There it is. Mike Albanese or Celise Davis. So here's what happens, right? So you get the table talk, right? And I think this is the match that made them add this to the tournament policy. When the match is over, there's 1 minute left on the timer. Mike Albanese loses here. Look at what Mike Albanese asks the judge and the opponent at this point, right? And this is again, nothing against the player. Nothing that happened here was against the rules. I think they just updated the policy, the tournament policy documents specifically in order to clarify that they do not want what happened here to happen again. So look. So this is where time is being called.
Tries to draw as fast as he can to go in the battle phase.
A draw is a loss. Can I ask my opponent if they will concede?
Can I ask my opponent if they will concede?
Is that like legal procedure?
He's asking. So again, it's that he's asking, meaning that players do not know the answer to this. So that's why they clarified it in the policy documents that you are not allowed to ask if your opponent would concede, despite the fact that time is being called. That's such a weird thing to ask. Okay, it would be a weird thing to ask if these two players were not very good friends. Like Elisa and Mike are very, very good friends. So basically what they're outlining is you are not allowed to ask your opponent to concede. I wanted to look at this though. when you would have rules against conceding at tournaments. So let's look at subsection Q. Conceding game or match is not specifically prohibited. In some instances, such as the World Championship, conceding matches may require additional steps or permissions. If you're unsure of the process, please ask a judge. That's simple. At Worlds, you are not allowed to concede. Time extensions. A section new to this document. Time extensions are covered in the infractions policy documents. We believe it makes sense to also include them here. So they just transferred it over. So nothing's changed. Bribery and collusion. We add information allowing prize splitting at the tournament organizer's discretion. I'm curious to know what they've noted about prize splitting, because usually you were never allowed to do that. You always had to play it out. At the tournament organizer's discretion, it is acceptable to split all prizing to be awarded to duelists remaining in a single elimination tournament or top cut if all those duelists agree to do so and no additional incentives or coercion is involved. This is commonly refusing to as a prize split and is not bribery or collusion. Tier 3 and higher events such as national championships, YCS, WCQ do not allow prize splits under any circumstance. What this means is, say for example, you go to a locals and your locals has 5 rounds. On the last round, if the 2 players that are like first and second place, those players are allowed to decide that they do not want to play and that they both just get 10 packs. So for locals levels and regional levels, you are allowed to prize split. Yeah, regionals is tier 2. So for tier 3 and higher, so Nats, YCS, WCQ, prize splitting is not allowed. Both get 10. Did I not say 20 packs and then both get 10? If I might have misspoke. Let me reword. If the prizing is 20 packs and they choose to split, both get 10. Cool. I'm glad that they allowed prize splitting and that they've noted that it's not considered bribery or collusion. Reporting match results, they've changed this. Match results for match concluded before the end of the round must be submitted within 5 minutes at the end of the round. If the match result is not submitted in time, both players will get a game loss. And the winner of the match is the one that has to submit the win. They added an additional tiebreaker. I don't know how you would do this. I don't much care, to be honest. It's very rare that tiebreakers resulted in an identical tiebreaker. But I guess it's good to have like one extra layer to dodge it. So I think that's a good thing. Tournament infractions. We clarified that penalties can be incurred for unsporting contact infractions happening outside of an event. We include a text notifying people that they will be added to the suspended persons list if they are suspended. This category covers infractions associated with inappropriate behavior, usually but not always during or associated with an event. Unsporting contact infractions are considered to be intentional. Persons who engage in unsported contact or behavior that endangers or detracts from an event will be removed from the venue. If KDUS determines that you have violated tournament policy infractions, you will be added to our public suspended players list, which is found on the same page as tournament policy documents at this page. Subsection 5, violating Konami Code of Conduct. What changed? This is a new section. Person who violated the Konami Code of Conduct may incur penalties, including suspension from Konami organized play and removal from an OTS. Okay, card legality. We clarified that you must drop for an event if you have marked cards that you cannot replace. Fair. That's to be expected. And that's it. That is all of the policy document changes. Let me know what you guys think. I'm curious to hear whether or not you feel like some of these need more clarification. If you guys are happy with the changes, not happy with the changes. But with that being said, bye YouTube. Bye. Chat, everyone, say bye to YouTube. Bye YouTube. Bye. Bye YouTube. Bye YouTube. Goodbye.